YouTube channel, so it will be available that way too. And I know a lot of you know each other, but I'm going to do a brief introduction of each person, and in the chat box, I'm putting their more lengthy biographies, so you can read that if you'd like to. But we have Chris Ferguson. He's an educator, composer, and trombonist, and he's the band director at Braxton Craven School in Trinity, North Carolina, and he's taught instrumental music education for over 20 years. Dr. Bill Harbinson, composer, educator. He's served at Appalachian State University as the coordinator of music theory, associate dean, and dean of the Hayes School of Music, and he appears regularly as a conductor, clinician, adjudicator, and guest composer and arranger. Ed Kiefer served as the director of bands at East Davidson High School in Thomasville, North Carolina for 28 years, and as director of instrumental music at Pfeiffer University for 6 years. He is sought after as an adjudicator, clinician, and conductor for state and national concert, marching, and jazz events. Matt Putnam is a band and choral director, composer, arranger, and educator. He has been teaching music in the North Carolina public school system for 27 plus years. Currently, he's the director of bands at Polk County Middle School in Mill Spring, North Carolina. And Mikkel Rogers is a composer and educator. He's a founding member of the Carolina Crown Drum and Bugle Corps and conductor of the Union Symphony Youth Orchestra. He's also director of bands at Weddington Middle School in Union County, North Carolina, and he frequently serves as a guest clinician and adjudicator. For those of you that are here to hear our speakers and have a dialogue with them, if you feel more comfortable using the reaction and putting your hand up, or your actual hand up if you have a question or comment, or if you feel more comfortable typing it in the chat box, that's fine. I'll be monitoring that. But welcome, gentlemen. And I thought we'd start off with something easy. Maybe tell us about when you started composing, and did you just kind of figure it out on your own, and maybe you had a mentor? And let's have Dr. Harbinson start for us.
Thanks. I first started putting notes to paper in high school when I was playing with a pop band that traveled the Southeast a lot. And I started arranging mostly Chicago tunes and things like that. That's when I first got fascinated with the way that stuff worked. And then at Appalachian, I had my first theory courses and just got fascinated there. And I took my first composition lessons at Appalachian with the organ teacher, because we didn't have a comp teacher at that time. And then went to Alabama for my master's degree. And that's when I took some serious comp lessons there and in my doctoral program at Florida State. So I started writing in high school as an arranger, and then wrote little pop songs and things like that. But seriously, at Appalachian about my junior or senior year.
Mikkel.
Yeah, it kind of came out of necessity. I was in the middle of trying to pick MPA music, and all the marches that I wanted to take, I either had already used, or they were too easy, or they were too hard, or they were too cheesy, or whatever. And so I just said, well, if I was going to write a march, how would it go? You know, and I just wrote one out and performed it. And then everybody was like, that's a great march. Are you selling it? And I said, well, here you go. You know, I was just handing it right. And then I just said, well, maybe there's something to this. And I just started writing. And it was just small steps after that. You know, I would perform it just with my own groups, or if I did an honor band clinic, I would play, you know, a piece of one of the pieces would be mine. And it just got bigger and bigger until, you know, a couple of people at NCMEA that were performing, you know, just happened to be playing one or two of my pieces, and a couple of people like Brian Ballmages were in the audience. And, you know, then it was, you know, kind of an email and say, hey, what do you think? And he said, well, that's not bad. Let's check this out. And then it just kind of went back and forth from there. And then all of a sudden, boom, there it was. So it came out of necessity rather than any, you know, formal training. Although I did take Bill Harbinson's music theory class. And Dr. Philip Paul's form and analysis class, which right there will tell you how rigorous I did that.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, how about you?
I was fortunate enough in high school to have a director, Calvin Bolton, who regularly wrote charts for our band. And I just thought that's what band directors did. So, you know, in college, I was involved in writing a little bit, and I had been a member of a drum and bugle corps and working with composers with that. And that's really how I got started as a marching band arranger. And then from that, I started doing some concert arrangements. I submitted a lot of stuff for publication over the years and got a lot of rejection letters and no letter at all. And it just kind of went off into the void. And it wasn't until probably about 10 years ago that Larry Clark, I met him at a clinic, and a good friend introduced us, and I submitted some stuff to him, and here I am today.
Great. I think that's the important thing for people to know. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not automatically yes the first time. So it takes some patience on your part.
Or the third or the fourth.
Yeah. Ed, how about you?
Well, I guess I got seriously interested in writing with George Knapp when he was my high school band director. He did a whole lot of charts. And I can remember being after some event, I would be out on the piano trying to figure out his chart to Somewhere Over the Rainbow or something. And he would be in his office doing work and just get so mad at me playing the wrong notes. He'd come out and show me the right stuff. So I could kind of figure out those chords. And then started teaching, and with my marching band, there's 25 kids in my high school band. They could play nothing that was, there was nothing they could play when I took over that band that was published. So everything we did for marching band, pet band, I wrote. So I kind of got to start with that. And then when I got to Pfeiffer, not having my PhD or doctorate or anything, they were after me about getting published. So I wrote Mountain Dance, and that was my first one that I sent in. I sent it to Larry, and he published it with Carl Fisher, and it got published and it got played in Chicago. It's still a really good seller for me. So that was kind of how the professional part of it got going. But I may be different than these guys, but I don't know if they'll tell you or not, but we don't make a whole lot of money with this. This is kind of like a labor of love a lot of times, especially when you're writing grade 4 or grade 5. Larry explained it to me like this: every band in the world can play grade 1. About 80% of them can play grade 2. You're down to less than 50% when you move into grade 3. And when you rate grade 4 or 5, you're looking at maybe 10 or 15% of the bands in the world. So your prospective consumer base gets really small.
Yeah.
So when you write a grade 4 piece or grade 5 piece, it's a lot of it. A lot of it's just a labor of love. Although, Mountain Dance got published as a 3. It's sold, and I've sold quite a few. And your partner has sold some harder stuff too. But I think I really got started because the whole time I was teaching, I kept hearing new charts and going, I know I can write better music than this, But then I found out I can't. You find out it's a whole lot harder than you think it is, because you have this great idea and you say, well, this is for an 8th grade band. I don't have enough voices for that chord, or that's too high. The ranges are not right, or that rhythm's too hard, or, that's too repetitive, or it's not, it's just a lot, really hard to balance that playability with non-predictability and creativity. That's a really hard balance. So I'm still working on that. I think most of us are.
Yeah, we all are.
Yeah.
Chris, how about you?
I have to mention that Chris and you both student taught with me. So that's a pretty good percentage up here on the screen.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It's I started writing basically, like Mikhail said, out of necessity for my band. I just had a hard time finding pieces that would fit where they were and the needs of my kids. And I had a list of everything that I wanted in a piece. And I kept going through J.W. Pepper catalogs to see if I could find them, and I could not find a piece. And I thought, well, I've got a blueprint right here. Why don't I take a shot and try to write my own to fit the specific needs of the kids? And that's how it started. And I remember it kind of touched on what some other people said too. It took me a year to write this first piece, and it was a march. And every weekend, every like free moment, every day, a little bit of writing every day to try and get this march. And I remember after an entire year, I had a friend who's a composer, really good composer. I sent it to him. It was Larry. Sent it to Larry to see if he could give me some advice on it. And after a year on this piece, 20 minutes later, he sends me an email back saying, yeah, you need to change these 5 things. And it was completely accurate and just totally transformed the piece. And I thought, I've been working on this for an entire year. And in 20 minutes, he's like just completely reworked the piece and it sounds so much better. And that's when I knew it was like, okay, well, this is harder. This is a lot harder than people think, like Ed said earlier, but there's something there. That's a nice challenge. So yeah, that's how I got started.
So I want to go back to something Ed was talking about with the balance. And are there times where you just compose and you are creative and you do whatever, and then you come back and edit? Or do you feel like you're ever limiting yourself, I guess, with the restrictions of what bands can do? Let's have Ed start with that one.
I think it's always restricted. I think even when you write for top, university wind ensembles, the trick is to make it sound hard and sound creative, and yet be lay on the fingers. I remember Bob Buckner telling me one time, I really like the way you write. You know where the bridge is on the clarinet. I mean, I've taught middle school for 28 years, so I know what's hard at each level, and same for everybody up here. We've all done that. So it makes it a little bit easier for us to know. But sometimes, that limits your creativity. You just don't have a choice. You really want this horn rip, and they can't do it. It's out of this. All of a sudden, a grade 2 piece turns into a grade 3. Well, it's really not challenging enough in other areas creatively or musically to be a grade 3. It's a tough balance.
Mikhail, how about you?
Yeah, to me, I mean, I can just speak for myself. It's more craftsmanship than creativity, if that makes any sense. It's more of establishing a set of guidelines for myself, and then trying to make it fit Willie Owens told me, he said, you got to write the same thing but different. Because if it departs too much from what people are expecting out of a piece, then you can't bring the audience with you, or the director. But if you can't, chuck out formula either. So I don't know. For me, it helps that FJH and I think most of the other labels do. They've got a rubric that defines, what rhythms, what ranges, what elements you can put in each of the grade levels. And what's interesting, it doesn't always jive with our own MPA rubrics. It's kind of interesting how that's how you get pieces on a 2 that are a 1 or whatever. But I find that it's helpful to have those, at least the restrictions, to know what you can't do, because it eliminates the pool of resources. It's like trying to paint a painting with 4 colors. You have to get more creative with what you're using, as opposed to just having, something inspired come to you. I mean, it's great if that does happen, but usually, at least for me, it doesn't. For me, it's all about, these are the elements I'm working with. Let's build something that sounds good.
Dr. Harbinson, how about you?
Yeah, those are great comments. When I'm writing for younger groups, I'm always trying to think that it doesn't limit my creativity. It challenges my creativity. That I think the limitations, in a strange way, cause me to be more creative, because there are some things you can work with. Like, I've never shied away from an interesting harmony for a young band, because if the notes are accessible and the rhythms are accessible, then eventually they will hear the harmonies. And so I would always try to expand the harmonic language for the young groups, because you have to, there are limitations, but I always thought it made me more creative. I had a great opportunity to write some really difficult music at Appalachian and get it played very well. And that was, in another way, that was also very challenging and very creative. But I never felt really limited when I wrote for younger bands. I just felt more challenged.
Chris, how about you?
I feel like this is, I try to stay in my wheelhouse a bit, but when I write, there's always a band in my head. And I still do this. Anytime I write a piece, I go through every single part and I play every single part on the instrument to make sure it fits the kid. So I'll pick up the flute and I'll play the flute part. I'll play the first, second trumpet part. And if I can't, if there's an instrument I can't get my hands on, I'll pick up my trombone and play it. And I play through each one because I really want to see what that part feels like through the kid's view. And so when I write, I want to make sure, like Ed said earlier, if it lays well on the instrument. It could sound great, but it's not going to get played if it's not accessible. And that's the challenge and that I want to try to meet, is make sure everything I write is accessible to the kid so it gets played, so it can connect with the kid.
Awesome. Matt, how about you?
I kind of like the challenge of, I've got parameters that I have to stay within and be creative in that aspect. When you're writing a beginning band piece, a lot of the companies, their rubric will say you can only use the first 6 notes of the B flat concert scale. You've got very limited rhythms. It's a challenge, to create a worthwhile piece of music being that limited. But I kind of enjoy that. I like the limitations. If you say, Matt, write anything you want to, sky's the limit, then I get a little nervous, because it's like, well, there's all these expectations. What am I going to? So I like having the box and being creative within the box, and I might challenge the edges of that box a little bit, but I enjoy that. I'm a bit of an engineer in addition to a musician, so I enjoy that problem solving, trying to make something worthwhile within limited technical ability.
I guess most of us probably have this very romantic notion of what being a composer is, and it's nothing like what you think it is. It sounds like it's, and I
Well,
like
you can't see the rose petals on the floor here. Oh, no, sorry.
I really appreciate that word craftsmanship, and that makes me think of it differently, and being somewhat of a painter and a person who likes to draw, I can understand that with the limited color. So that makes a lot of sense. I like that analogy. How has your work as directors influenced your work? I know you've touched on that a little bit, and especially having to compose out of necessity. But what are some other things you've pulled into your composing because of your careers? And let's have Chris go first.
Well, I would say the more I write, it makes me understand the fundamentals of the different instruments better, a better way of using horn, why horn is so important, why tenor sax is so important, why balance is so important. And we talk about creating and trying to stay in this box that the publishers kind of give us to stay in with the first 5 notes and such. One of the great things that I've discovered along the way is, the people on this screen are an incredible resource. If I have a problem, I'll send Mikkel an email, and it's like, Mikkel, I'm trying to get this sound, I'm trying to make this work, and can you help me out? And everyone helps each other out. That's a big plus there. So, and the better, I feel like the better I get at composing, the better teacher I am. And the better teacher I am, it impacts, so the two kind of go back and forth.
Matt, would you like to chime in on that one?
Teaching middle school for the length of time that I did, it really made me a better composer. Ed talked about, the facility for each instrument, being able to incorporate that into your writing. That really helped me a lot. Teaching kids to play, knowing the skills they needed to develop to get to the next level. That really helped me. And also my kids were good, willing lab rats for me to try things on as far as writing. They were really good sports, and were always excited about me putting something new in front of them. So, they encouraged me in that aspect. A lot of times I'd get their input to naming, giving titles to works, because that's my least favorite part of this whole deal is.
Oh, I'm glad that's not just me.
I wrote this piece, what am I going to call it? Middle school kids are great at coming up with ideas for stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, working with kids really took my writing to a whole different level. I mean, it took it out of the academic and put it in the real world when you put a chart in front of them.
That's really cool. Dr. Harbinson, how about you?
Well, I'm not near as prepared to answer this question as my 4 colleagues on here, because they've been in the trenches and doing the work. But I will say that I think is the very best way to learn. When somebody asks me, like, I'd really like to do this, how do I do it? I say, get a teaching gig, get a teaching degree and a teaching gig and teach, and learn how it works and what doesn't work, because you'll play a lot of music that's really written very badly, very poorly for the instruments, and you'll learn from that as much as you'll learn. I only had 3 years in the public schools, but those 3 years I learned a lot, and not enough, but I learned a lot. So I actually do think that's the very best way to go about it. Now, from the conducting standpoint, I think if you've solved problems in your own works, and these other folks know what I'm talking about. If you've hit the wall and you've solved problems and worked through these problems in your own works, then you'll see how very, very easily, or more easily, how other composers have solved problems in their works, which helps you interpret and teach them so much more quickly than if you hadn't seen. There are a lot of questions, times when you question yourself, well, why did they write that way? And a lot of times you'll say, oh, I see why they wrote it that way, because I had the same issue.
Yeah.
Mikhail, how about you?
Yeah, I'm nodding along to everything Dr. Harbinson just said, because that's exactly, I've become I don't know if I want to say cynical, but I've become a lot more critical of other people's writing. In terms of, I mean, because I'm already critical of my own writing, but it's, self-torture is part of who I am. But it's enabled me to evaluate a piece of music a lot quicker, and also to figure out what really is good out there, because there's a lot that's really, really good out there, but there's a lot that's not. Yeah. And a lot of people who are less experienced, young directors or something like that, will see a grade 2 list and say grade 2 is grade 2 is grade 2. And I'm like, no, not really. Some of it's really, really bad. And I had a student teacher a couple of years ago who was so excited to come and look in my library, because she was like, you've been there 20 something years, you must have a huge library. And I don't. It's very well curated. I buy a lot of music, but then a lot of it gets donated or recycled or whatever, because I'll, try something and, I'll curate. And I end up usually doing, the same, 50 or 60 pieces over the course of 5 or 6 years, just because I don't know, they're just so well written. There's some that are just written well above, everything else, so that's just my take on it. But it makes me a better evaluator, which, is great when you're trying to program an MPA performance too. So you don't, sabotage yourself.
So I am living with a composer, and it hasn't been for very long, but I see the process and I see the questioning, everything. Do you guys ever suffer from imposter syndrome, or do you get writer's block? And what do you do to get yourselves out of that? And what advice maybe you have for people who are trying to work through this and become composers? Let's have Matt go first.
Well, I was going to listen to everybody else, because I need some of that. I need some of that advice. It's always self-doubt. What am I doing? And, I'm never going to write another worthwhile piece. I mean, it's like you go through that all the time. It's a lot of, being a composer is a lot of loneliness, a lot of time questioning decisions you've made with your writing. But every once in a while, you'll have a breakthrough, and it makes it all worthwhile. But Yeah, I get writer's block. And it seems to free up at the most inopportune times. When I don't have time to write is when the muses seem to come to me and, oh, here's great ideas, and you don't have time to write. That just seems the way it works out for me. So I don't have an answer for how to solve that problem. I just kind of go with the flow, and when it comes, and when it doesn't, it doesn't.
Ed?
I want to say something about that last question too. These guys gave some great answers. For me, as a teacher, I know it took me a while to figure out that the music, the literature that I put in front of the kids was really one of the defining things that, defined how well I could teach and how much success my kids had. And having a great piece of music in front of kids, I just think that's really, really important. And like Chris said a little earlier, checking out every part and making sure that everybody's got something fun to do, because sooner or later you're going to be in that room getting ready for your concert or MPA or whatever. And if somebody's playing whole notes the whole time, they're going to be a problem in your classroom.
Hey, sorry to call.
So you want a great piece of music. And so as a composer, of course, you're always trying to write a great piece of music. And like Kelly told me one time, some of my pieces, it's like raising a kid. You raise your kid, and then you raise your kid, and you do the best you can. But sooner or later, that you've got to send him off. And he's same with his pieces. Sometimes they go off and do clinics and all that, and other times, his pieces go to jail. So sometimes the stuff you write, it's not that great, at least for me. You hit one every now and then. But you want a great piece of music, and for me, before I send it to somebody, there's got to be something different about it. It can't be like all the other pieces that have been written at grade 2 level or 3. I want something completely different. And sometimes that makes it not playable or maybe not that great. But I've had 2 editors tell me that you've never sent me 2 pieces that sound anything like each other. So I think that's pretty important, that we write something that challenges kids and gives them a reason to come to class every day. I think we've got to choose music. Like Mikhail said, there's some things that are written really well, and you've got to put that kind of music in front of your kids. You can't put it just because everybody else is playing, or just because Kelly wrote it doesn't mean it's a great piece, or just because Mikhail wrote it or Ed Kiefer wrote it doesn't mean it's a good piece of music. Just because the last one you played by them you like doesn't mean the next one you will. You got to really study it. But to answer the next question, I read a book by Hemingway. It's just a chapters that he wrote when he was in Paris. He got published in a London newspaper, and one of them was about writer's block. You mentioned that, writer's block. And this is really hard for me to accept, but he said, there's no such thing as writer's block. Amateurs write when they feel the muse, when they feel inspired. A professional writes every single day. And you may write, what you write may be trash. And I'm paraphrasing really freely. You may be trash, but when you throw it away the next day and start again, there's something in that trash that may spark a really good idea for later. So if you stay at it, and like Mikhail said earlier about craftsmanship, I think you just got to stay at it. Now, I don't write every day. I write about 2 pieces a year, so I'm not writing as much as some of these other guys. I just got other stuff that I want to get into. But you've got, when you're working on a piece, you got to do it. You just got to stay at it and write even when you're having a bad day. Just got to stay at it. At least that's the way it works for me. And I'm sure everybody's different.
Ed, aren't you? I'm glad you mentioned Hemingway, because I was going to say that he always said that he never went to bed until he knew what he was going to write the next day. Like, that way he would never have writer's block. He would go to bed knowing what was going to happen next in whatever he was writing. But thank you, Miss Repko, my 7th grade English teacher. Yeah.
Well, that was one of the hints clues I have that have helped me a lot, is that I always write, if I'm trying to write a piece, and I don't write every day, of course, particularly not now, but I don't write every day, but I would always write, if I had a piece facing me and I had to write, I would write something, because I knew that no matter how bad it was, if I'm a good enough composer, I'll come back to that something and fix it. I could come back the next day and I've got something from which to start.
Kind of like an arrangement.
Yeah. And the other thing is, one of the professor once told me when I was talking with him about, a problem, and he said, well, I'll tell you what you do. He said, when you get rolling, stop. And this is kind of like what Mikhail said. He said, when you get rolling, stop and come back to it the next day. And I thought, well, that'll just stop them. I like to write. When I get rolling, I can write. I can really write. And he said, no, but when you get up the next day, you know where you're going, just like Mikhail said. So you're in the middle of this thing and you know exactly where it's going. If you stop the next day and you get up, you can finish that. And that's what gets you going the next day. It was a really, really helpful hint.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. And it's one of the things that struck me over the years. It's kind of like when you're writing a piece of music, I feel like it's the same as getting a band ready for MPA or some kind of judge festival. The first 80% comes pretty quick. 80 to 90% comes pretty quick. It's that last 10% that drives you crazy.
Yeah.
And I've got several pieces that'll, it's like, oh, I'm going to write a piece about geysers. What would it be like if a band played a piece that sounded like geysers erupting all over the place? Let's do this. Oh, this is a great idea. And you get this framework there and you fill in, and then you get to that last 10% where you got to make sure all the leading tones go where they should too. And that's what takes the most time for me. And that's where I'll get consumed by it and Simon can speak to that. I see her on there. I'll get consumed, and like for 2 or 3 days, I'm just like racking my heads, and then I just got to step away, work on a different piece, and then come back with the first perspective. And that's why for me, I can't write a piece in a weekend. That's why, an average piece takes a year or more, because you keep coming back to it, and you're never satisfied. Just like there's never a perfect performance, you're never, there's always something that you feel like we can do this to tweak this, and the only thing that stops you is the deadline. You got to get it in. But that's again, just that last 10% seems to be the struggle, and that's why it takes so long. You just got to keep coming back time and time again until you get as close as you can, for me.
Well, and part of it is also that you have to, at least I feel like I have to actually believe in the music that I'm actually writing before I submit it to somebody. And that's where the I don't want to say bruised ego thing comes in, but you're taking something that you've worked on personally, and you truly honestly believe that you've looked at it as best you can, you've done the best you can with it, you've looked over every note and agonized over every chord, and then you have to put it into the realm of whoever you're submitting it to and hope that they just don't trash it. I mean, they don't trash it, but I mean, they'll come back and say, hey, this one really didn't do it for me. And then you're like, oh, because for every piece I've got published, I've got 2 on my hard drive that didn't go through. So, and sometimes I rework them and resubmit and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But if for me, if I'm not, it's an emotional roller coaster to believe in something that you're writing, because at the moment that you're writing it, it's the most important thing you've ever done. And then you submit it, and then it's out of your hands, and, I mean, I can count on one hand the number of times that Brian sent back something to me that didn't ask for a change of some kind or type. And that's fine. That's what we're supposed to do. He knows the market, and he knows what's going to sell better and all this other kind of stuff. And, 99% of the things he asked me to change, I totally get, and I'm like, oh, wow, I should have thought of that, but it is interesting because you almost are like hesitant to give your musical child up for them to, say, okay, do this, and, so yeah, it is just a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And if you should never take the attitude of, this is the piece, this is how I wrote it, it's perfect, it's not changing. If you have that attitude, then it's never going to go anywhere, because there's a lot of other people that have a lot of other ideas for it, and they're usually different than yours. And if you are smart, you listen to them.
I just want to add, kind of along what Mikhail's saying, if you were to write a poem, a personal poem about your life, and then let a whole bunch of other people look at it, you're just bearing your soul when you do that with words. But we're musicians. So when we do it with music, for us, that's the same thing. When we put a piece out there, whether it's published or not, and we play it, and we believe in it, we like, it's our baby. We've been raising it for 6 months or a year, whatever. And then people don't like it. It's the same feeling that a lot of people would get if they were writing lyrics or poetry. Because the music's what's inside us, maybe not the lyrics.
Right. No, those are all fascinating points. This is kind of an aside question. I was just curious. How have you been affected as composers through the pandemic? Did it stop you cold, or have you been more prolific with your composition? And anybody can answer.
I'll tell you what happened is that the publishing industry just completely tanked. What stopped was the sales. And we ended up having to, a lot of labels started to kind of revamp what they were doing. That's where the flexible instrumentation arrangement started to come from. Immediately when FJH decided to do that, he said, I want you to, because my 2 bestsellers are Union March and Destiny Fanfare. He said, I want flex arrangements of those in 2 days, and then boom, 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 boom. And this is how you're going to do it. Da, 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 da. And the idea was to get cash flow going again in the companies, because and all of the companies want to provide quality literature for the bands. That is part of it. And they have good intentions in so doing. However, the number one priority is to sell. And if you can make the sale and at the same time fund an educational need, then that's perfect, but a lot of it is going to be with what the public is going to purchase. And it's really interesting how on the other side of it, I don't know if anybody else has observed this, but on the other side of it, people are constantly analyzing the trends of what type of music sells, or what grade level at what year, at what what genre. People have said, does it sell more if there's a space thing in the title? Does it sell more if it's in this key? Does it sell, and so there's a lot of that going on behind the scenes, which makes sense, but a lot of that just had to get redefined completely when COVID hit, and because the sales pretty much stopped when nobody's meeting, nobody's purchasing anything. And so there was that aspect of it. And then there was also just from a me standpoint, I ended up doing a lot of writing, but it was all, just stuffing it on a hard drive and saving it for later or whatnot. It's only now just starting to pick back up again, where people are in a financial position where they've got a band that they could actually start doing commissions again, or they can start purchasing music again. And even now, take a look at the new releases in a lot of the labels. The catalogs are smaller. The new releases are a lot smaller. And so that means, fewer slots for people as far as getting in the catalog. So, it's coming back. But it was like it was a dead stop, and now we're like taking small steps back towards normality, and we're not quite there yet, but it's at least going in that direction. And I'm sorry I went on that answer real quick, but yeah, I'll shut up now on that one.
That's okay. Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, for me it was I'm retired, but in 2019 I was in 100 band rooms. In 2020 it stopped. And even now there's a lot of school districts that won't let me in their band room. And for me, it's all about being with the kids. That's what I really love doing. And I like writing, but I really love being with the kids. And being with the kids was something I've written. That's a real thrill for me. And so I just kind of got kind of depressed. And all my friends are writing, because they got all day and they write the whole 2 years or whatever. And I didn't put very much out. I think 2 pieces I did in that time. Although I did do some flex arrangements like Mikhail was talking about. Did flex arrangements of those Masters Rework series that have the rap beat behind them, and the kids can play along. You know, the band plays along to a rap beat. That sold like crazy. I made more money with C. Allen than I've ever made with my life with in 2020 and 2021 with flex charts to about 4 of those pieces. And, you know, the kids could do those at home along with the track, and they thought they were doing something. But no, I was depressed. I know you guys were that were in the classroom, but I was physically and mentally distressed, and I just got to be around the kids. I could be around Dave's kids occasionally if we were outside. And that was about it for me. And, you know, before I'd been doing some bands that I did once a week for maybe 12, 14 weeks. And other bands that haven't been once or twice during MPA. And that started back up. My counter's getting kind of full now, but before it was depressing. And I can't write when I'm feeling that way. I wrote a couple pieces and that's it. It did affect, I think it affected everybody in some way or other. And I don't know how, my hat's off to all you teachers that got through this and you still have kids in your classroom.
Amen.
If you have kids in your classroom, you won. Because I've been to a lot of classrooms, the kids aren't there anymore. And I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to get back. And high school band directors are going to be dealing with this for 3 or 4 more years. Because whether they want to admit it or not, the middle school is where it's at. Mm-hmm. And you can't teach beginning band no matter how good you are online. And we're out a couple years. Our ensembles are gonna, and college will be suffering 5, 6 years from now. So I think it's affected all of us, not in a good way. Although some of you guys are geniuses, how stuff you figured out to do, you know. My editor telling me to do those flex charts. That was a genius thing because he made a lot of money too off of that. That was good.
It was nice to have the whole composition world turn. It felt like it turned on a dime because I remember right after everything happened, I was trying to just ingest all the information I could, and things happened relatively quickly with compositions and having things for kids. So I'm very appreciative of what happened. Dr. Harbinson, Matt, Chris, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only real effect that I felt from it, because as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't in the classroom, and I really felt for the teachers. I really did. But I'm with Mikhail. Thing that I felt obviously was the lack of sales, and not only was there a lack of sales, there was the the word from the publishers that we didn't sell anything last year, so we can't put anything out next year. And then we haven't sold hardly anything. So, instead of 2 or 3 pieces, you might get a piece on the list. If you're lucky, you get a piece, and I got lucky and survived it. But I have 2 last year, I think, and 1 this year. But and they say, we know we need to be taking more, but we just can't publish more. We just can't do it. So that's the thing that I think is going to hurt. It's going to be a really big hole of new literature for a while because they won't print new literature. I mean, I guess the nicest way I had it put to me was we're going to be emphasizing the great pieces that are already in our catalog, which means they're not going to put out new stuff. And I understand it. I mean, it's business. They got to make money. And there was nothing, 0 sales in 2020 almost. So that's the only effect that I've seen because I haven't been in the classroom, but I cannot imagine what it must have been like and continues to be like, as Ed said, and I think it will continue to be like that for a number of years.
Yeah, we're not through this yet, unfortunately, but we're getting close. We're getting close. And the thought that I had all last year and when it hit was keep them playing. We've got to find a way to keep them playing no matter what. And that's one of the things where I felt lucky having some compositional skills. I could write specific things out and push it out to the kids through the screen. Or we had a tent outside the band room. We called it Ferguson's Tootin' Tent, and I gave private lessons out there right at the start of school, just make sure everyone got a good foundation so we can continue virtually. And even though the publishing world just kind of collapsed on itself, every composer that I know just was constantly putting new material out there to help mitigate this. So many different approaches to teach the B flat major scale. You know, each composer had, it felt like a packet that they could send out to the kids that they would share it. And that was one of the things I remember last year was every week we saw on Facebook or somewhere a composer wrote something and would share it out to other band directors. I know Mikhail had great stuff out there, and we would just share all amongst, just again, the mantra was just keep them playing, reach them, connect them however you can, keep them playing. And that was cool.
Matt, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I had the good fortune in 2018, Tyler Arcari, my editor at Excelsior, approached me with the idea of starting an adaptable ensemble series, you know, before, you know, the flex thing really took off, before the pandemic. And we'd already done a duet and a trio book where you could mix any combination of instruments. And we had that mechanism in place. And then when 2020 happened, we really expanded on that. So I was able to stay busy with those kinds of things, you know, during the pandemic. Writing for me during that time period was a little bit like therapy. You know, I could come home and, you know, forget about what the day was like dealing with all the COVID protocols and what it was doing to the band program, and just kind of get in the zone. So I, like these guys, I've got quite a catalog of stuff that may or may not get published at some point in the future, but it was a productive time for me. But it was, like I said, it was like therapy for me. But the adaptable, the flex thing really took off, and I was thankful for that out of a bad situation.
Yeah, everybody was very generous, and it was a relief to know that you had resources out there and people to help. So I want to take this from a different angle, and please be honest, because this can only help us as band directors. But what advice or instructions do you have for band directors when they're performing or working on your pieces? Let's have Matt do this one again.
Well, first thing is that I encourage anybody playing my stuff, if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to talk to you via, you know, phone call, email, FaceTime, whatever. I'd love to have that conversation with you or your kids. The other thing would be, you know, just bring your musicality to the notes on the page. Your interpretation may be different from mine, but just be true to your own musical ideas, and try to instill that in your kids. When I write a piece of music, especially for middle school level, I call it gateway music. You know, I'm writing something to get them to the next level. So I want them to be passionate about it, to want to do this well, so they get to that next piece. They get to, you know, the great band composers, more exciting music, take it to the next level. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you.
Dr. Harbinson, how about you?
Yeah, I'm second the part about the Skype and everything. I love doing those things, and it really doesn't happen that often, which might surprise you. I get a number of emails about this piece and that, you know, this instrument or using that there or substituting this there, and I'm happy to answer those all the time. And I always say at the end of it, hey, if you're going to play it, you know, let's Skype sometime and do it. It doesn't happen as often as you might think, and I would love to do that. The thing though, in general, you ask about advice about playing my pieces. I don't think it's any different than the advice about playing everybody's pieces. And as a person who spends a lot of days listening to 20 bands a day, you know, and doing all that adjudicating and stuff, is pick music that you have a chance of playing. Honestly, the biggest failure I see is to overreach for your students, because you really want to conduct that piece. Now, by the way, this doesn't happen so much at the middle school level. It happens at the high school level a lot. Man, I really want to conduct Light Cavalry Overture. We're going to do Light Cavalry. You know, they got 2 clarinets, and so basically the same about playing my piece and everybody's piece. Study the piece. Make sure you have, first of all, the instrumentation to play it. And if you have the instrumentation to play it, then be honest with it. Give it a good try, and you're going to be fine. give it a good try, but don't, just be careful how you pick your music. It's the most important thing you're going to do. You pick something they can't reach. It's not going to be a positive experience if they can't reach it.
Chris?
Yeah, to kind of follow up with what he said, every year I would ask the kids, the last day of school, we would talk about all the pieces that we played, and I asked them what their favorite piece was. And I would always expect them to pick the fast piece, the hard piece, the loud, exciting piece. And it was always a piece from the winter concert. And I said, well, all these other pieces, they're so impressive. Don't you like this one? No, we like this other one. Why do you like it? Because we can play it. Oh, because we could. I said, well, you could, but we went to festival. We got all the right. Yeah, but we felt good playing this one. And when kids feel good about playing it, they go beyond what's on the page. We don't write notes, we write music, and that's what we want the kids to be able to do, to go beyond the page. So, knowing your ensemble well and picking that right music, because the ensemble where you can take them, is key to doing that. But yeah.
Out of the mouths of babes. Mikhail, how about you?
I'm a middle school guy. I've always been a middle school guy. This is my 28th year teaching. All of it's been in middle school. I'll arrange marching shows, but as far as like published music and stuff, it's all middle school. And if I tried to write a high school piece, it would sound like a really hard middle school piece, is basically what would happen. And so when I'm dealing with middle school students, whether it's at a clinic or whether it's at a just my own band or whatever, for me, I want to write the music that the kids are going to go away singing or enjoying the most. Not to say that you sacrifice any musical integrity or anything like that, but if they're not behind the piece, it doesn't matter, how, I don't want to write angsty stuff. The world's angsty enough. And so I want to write the fun stuff that people go away, singing and saying, hey, that was fun. That was a fun piece. And, like I said, it doesn't have to be, hokey, but I just want them to feel good about it. And one of the things that I did was I would ask, the second piece that I wrote was called Autumn Fanfare. And the reason that it's written the way it's written is because I asked all of my kids, I said, what is your favorite thing to do on your instrument? More than anything else, not like sound effects or whatever. All the flutes said trills. We love trills more than anything else. Okay, fine. It's going to have trills in it. The trombone said, we want the melody. Okay, fine. Trombones are getting the melody for, 4 bars or whatever, stuff like that. The timpani player was like, I really want to do bang, 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 bang on, like a tonic and dominant thing. All right, fine. If you look at Autumn Fanfare, everything is in there. Everything that a kid loves to do is in there. And it's one of my favorite ones to take to clinics and things like that. Willie takes it to every clinic he goes to, just about. It's just, that's what I wanted. I wanted to see what the kids wanted that I could still use and still be musically, what do you call it? Musically sophisticated, I guess is the word. And when you get that marriage of likability and musical integrity, then you've got a hit, and then you can be happy with what you did. That's just my take on it. And that's my middle school brain, thinking that, as opposed to, I would fall on my face if I tried to write an angsty, Francis Macbeth type piece or whatever. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Ted Neely wrote in the chat box that they're working on Autumn Fanfare currently.
Cheers, dude. Thank you.
Ed, did you want to add anything to that?
I have to agree with what they've said. First of all, I don't know how people find my music. It's like, 1,000 new pieces come out every year. And how does anybody ever find my piece to play? So I just feel honored when somebody plays my music, even if they play it really, really badly. I feel really honored.
Yeah.
But most time they play it really well. I think what Harbinson said, play just like you do everybody else's, listen to the recording, listen to maybe a couple recordings, study it and play it, play it the best you can play. But but I'd like to also say that I guess I had a little different philosophy with my middle school band and my high school band. A lot of people, for example, a lot of people would have a weak trombone section. So they would pick a piece that kind of hides trombones for MPA. So guess what they have next year? Another weak trombone section. So I would pick a piece that featured my trombones. And by gosh, I have to teach that semester and they have to learn. Well, we're not going to do well. And sometimes it didn't work out for me, but most of the time it did. But more than that, I think you need to pick a piece of music that's a good piece of music that's musical. You know, you can play your ABA piece that's really standard, one that if somebody plays the first 4 bars, you can sing the next 4 bars even though you've never heard it before. It's so predictable. You can play that and get a 1 in MPA. But what have you done? You haven't gotten anywhere. You could play it musically even. Maybe you could play soft and loud and legato or staccato, whatever. If you take a musical piece, a really good piece of music, and then you start putting your musicality to that piece, the kids are going to fall in love with it. David Gregory taught me this a long time ago. He said, you know, and when I was recruiting for Pfeiffer, he said, you know, music is like radioactive uranium. All by itself, without a director, without a good band, it attracts kids to it. It's radioactive uranium. No matter, you can walk, he said, I know you've done it. You've walked into a band that's terrible, the band director is terrible, and there's some kid in there that loves music and is a good player. And you're asking that kid to come with you to Pfeiffer. It's just that music is so strong by itself, and we forget that. We think it's about our personality, or about, you know, letting the kids have 5 minutes off at the end of the class. Where it's about the music. And if you make it about the music and you pick only good music, maybe you can't play it exactly like it's supposed to be played, but only good music, and play that. And forget about picking easy pieces for MPA. Just pick a good piece of music and play it. Maybe those 2 clarinets can play the hell out of Light Cavalry. I don't know. You know, it's probably not a good choice, you know, and I think I've told maybe even people on the screen, you know, maybe you ought to think about something else. But man, play a good piece of music.
Yeah.
Just because it's got Ballmage's name on it, he's got some great music, but he's got some real not great music, just like everybody on this screen. You know, take your time. We spend in the high school world, most high school bands already know what they're playing next fall.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what they're playing in March.
Mm-hmm.
They spend all that time picking out music for their marching band. We need to spend that kind of time picking out great music for our middle school bands and our high school bands. You know, and that's it needs to evolve. You know, we need to play new stuff. We need to get new stuff in front of the kids, but it needs to be quality literature. Those 1,000 compositions that come out every year, you know, there's probably 10 that are really, really, really worth digging your teeth into. And I'm including mine in that 95%, you know, that's not that great. None of us here are Beethoven. Nobody on the screen here is Beethoven. I mean, you know, you don't need to play every single thing we wrote.
Shucks. Now I go and to go just kind of back up on Ed's great comment about if you have weak trombones, pick a piece that has a difficult trombone part. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about picking a piece where you don't have the instruments.
Right.
You know, and the other thing I would say, which is along the same lines, is don't shy away from playing a composer's work because they're on your adjudication pattern. I never have understood that. There's an opportunity for you to get firsthand comments about how to get into that piece and what's insightful about it. I promise you won't. I don't know. I can speak the rest of them, but they're all really good colleagues. So I bet you'll not be graded harder or easier because you played their work. You're just going to get a more insightful set of comments than you would have gotten if you didn't take that opportunity.
Well, I like hearing how everybody else does it. You know, I was like, oh, I like how you pulled that phrase. I'll do that next time.
Right. Yeah. Boy, I didn't expect that. I didn't even know that was in there that could be done that way. That's really nice. Yeah.
Chris, was it you that did that? You did that to Jester Dance, didn't you? At summer camp, like you did an Accelerando on the last phrase and had the kids yell and all that. I sent the recording of that. That's totally not in the score. And he actually asked me, can I do that? I said, yeah, you can do whatever you want. And he sent me the recording. I'm like, that is awesome. I am so doing that. So yeah, we do Jester Dance every year, and sometimes we do it that way.
Nice.
That's really cool. Well, I want to ask one more quick question. And before we ask that, I just want to thank you all. This has been an amazing band talk, and I have really, really enjoyed it. And I hope others will listen to the recording and enjoy it as well. And it's just been so insightful. So I really appreciate your time tonight. The last thing I wanted to ask was, what is one thing you want people to walk away with knowing about you as a composer? And let's have Matt go.
One thing to know about me as a composer, this is going to sound silly, but referring to myself as a composer feels a little otherworldly to me, because I'm just a band guy. I'm just a band director. This label of being a composer. When I tell people I'm a composer, I think they imagine me wearing, the Bach wig or something. That's not it at all. I'm just a regular guy that I write music. And I guess that would be my thing. Composers we're just normal people that we do something that's maybe not normal to everybody, but we're just down to earth people that we write music.
How about you, Mikkel?
We're not dead. We're still alive, I basically what he was saying, I realized that a lot of us are either in the profession now or have been in the profession long enough to know what we want out of a piece of music. And so we have your students' best interests at heart, because we want you to have an easy time with our piece. We don't want you to struggle with it. We want you to enjoy it and have a good time with it, and have the kids have a good time with it. And I think that comes across when you have, somebody writing who has been in the trenches, either currently or in the past for a long time.
Chris?
Yes, we're approachable, and we want you to succeed on all our music. And anyone playing any of our pieces, and just teaching in general, biggest advice for kids is to take a chance. Try that hard piece out. Try out for all district, try out for all county. Take a chance. You're gonna take a chance on anything, take a chance on yourself.
Amen to that one. Dr. Harbinson?
That's a good question. It's a tough question. And particularly for the reason that they've already answered most of what I was going to say. We are accessible, we are there, and we do have your best interests at heart. And the one thing I've learned over 4 decades of publishing, and none of these guys, some of these guys hadn't been alive 4 decades. So 4 decades of publishing is that it's an honor when somebody chooses to play your music out of all the choices that they have. Out of the many, many, many choices they have that go back a century or more, and they pick your piece to play. What an honor that is. And I think you should approach it like that. We actually owe you for picking that piece to play. So don't be a bit afraid about emailing or Skyping or something to getting in touch with us. We owe you for picking the piece. You don't owe us anything. And so don't be afraid to pick up a piece and contact. And if you pick up a piece, and you contact the composer and they're an SOB, don't play their music. Just don't.
And Ed?
I think they about covered it. I think for me, just call me. I'll be in your band room. That's what I do. What I like to do. That's my favorite thing. It may be why I write music. It's so I can, I'm 67, so I'd pretty much be phased out by now if I wasn't writing music. People would have forgotten who I was. So by writing music and staying on the front lines a little bit, I get to go into a lot of band rooms and I have a blast. It's really a lot of fun. And I love working with kids. So if you need somebody, give me a call.
And Ed's really good at that.
He is. I can attest to that.
We had
Yes,
a good
he
time in
is.
Chicago, didn't we, Matt?
Yeah.
Working with
have
that
good-
band. That was fun.
Yeah.
Do these guys have questions that they want to
Yeah.
ask?
Does anybody else have anything they want to ask?
Mercedes?
We have composer John Buffett with us too, if he'd like to say anything.
Yeah, no, I think you guys have. Have really pretty much covered everything. I mean, you guys are the just a fan. I've just learned so much just listening to you guys, and I think a lot of this for me has just been, gosh, it's just kind of validation. I can't remember who said that this is just kind of a lonely thing that you wind up doing, and a lot of times when you're writing, you just kind of feel like you're on this. You just kind of feel like you're out there by yourself. And, Ed was talking about how when you send music off and you're sending really a piece of your soul out there, and there's just all this anxiety about, they like it, they don't like it. If you get a piece accepted for publication, man, you're on cloud nine. It's like, great. And if you didn't get a piece accepted, it's like, oh God, I suck. And that may not be the case. It could be a great piece. It just didn't fit the catalog, or like somebody else said too, there's a lot less being published, and there's a lot more composers out there. And so there's much fewer slots. And I really feel like too, people reaching out to composers. I've only been doing this a few years, but still, man, somebody asks you about your music, dude, you just light up like a Christmas tree. Heck yeah, I'll talk to you all day about this. You should never be afraid to do that. I can remember going to Midwest and seeing these famous composers and not really knowing what to say. And what I discovered is you go up and you introduce yourself. Hey, I'm John Bubbett from Birmingham, Alabama. I really like this piece of music. And that's pretty much all you have to say. They're going to jump in there and take over from there. But no, man, you guys, this has really been awesome. You guys really, really hit the nail on the head. And Ed, what you said about, it's about the music, that is so true. And the guys here, they're not talking about their marching band show for next year. They've got that down. They're talking about the next year after that. And you're exactly right. They don't have a clue what they're going to play this spring. And I think that's just sort of an indictment on music education in general. But that's all you can do is sigh and just shrug about that one and just hope. But the picking good music is just so vitally important. And just because it's grade 2 or grade 1 doesn't mean it's got to be cheesy or bad. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. There's also a lot of really bad stuff out there. And so we have to leave it up to our musical integrity to make that work. Bill, you were talking about doing like Calvary Overture. For years and years, I had a grade 4 band that was playing grade 5 and grade 6 music. Well, that's because I rewrote everything so that the kids could play it, So, but anyway, I'm sorry, I'm kind of running on. But you guys, this was awesome. You guys have been fantastic. Bravo.
Well, I want to say to each of you, and as well to John Bubbett, every one of you, I have done pieces with my bands by you, and you all have a track record of, yeah, maybe everything wasn't stellar, but you have enough of a track record that kids love your music. And it's inspiring to teach when the kids love it. So I appreciate each one of you. And I thank you so much for your time tonight. And I'll let you know when this is available on YouTube. And I hope everybody has a good night.